Welcome to the fireside chat on fundraising for deep tech startups. We have with us Mr. Zerin Rahiman. Mr. Zerin is the co-founder and director of IndigoEdge Management Consultancy Private Limited. He has over 15 years of experience as a consultant, entrepreneur, mentor, and an investor at various phases of his professional career. Welcome, Mr. Zerin. We have with us Mr. Vinayak Godse. Mr. Vinayak is currently the Vice President of DSCI and heads National Center of Excellence, which is a joint initiative between DSCI and METI. He champions the cause of cybersecurity thought leadership and also conducts various training programs for C-level executives. Welcome, sir, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. Thank you, all the audience joining us today for this session where we will be trying to demystify the investment banking services for deep technology startups, and especially contextualizing for cybersecurity today. So we have with us Mr. is initially 10 minutes to explain us the work of investment banking in the area of investment or fundraising for the very different set of the organization, and especially for the deep technology startup. So he has some presentation slides to walk us through that. And post the presentation, we will have some questions from my side, and we'll also take an audience question as well to engage and to converse with Mr. Zerin. So over to you, Mr. Zerin.
Thank you, Mr. Vinayak. Just give me a moment. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, I'd like to make a small clarification. For some reason, my screen shows co-founder at Avendus, so I just need to clarify. Look, I'm the co-founder at IndigoEdge.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm not sure. It is probably picking from your LinkedIn, I'm sure, but it's okay.
Okay, cool. So first and foremost, thank you to everyone who's attending the session and to the organizers. These are unprecedented times, and it takes superhuman effort to conduct these kind of events. So thank you to the organizers and the audience. So I'll just give a brief introduction at my end so that you can take whatever I say with the appropriate pinch of salt. We are what is known as a boutique investment bank. When I co-founded the company in 2006 out of IIM Lucknow, I didn't know what that term meant. In hindsight, it's a fancy term for what we do for our clients. We raise institutional capital for them. Fundamentally, when we started up right after B school, we were very passionate about startups, tech, and personally, I'm a very lazy person. So if anything is not automated or inefficient, it starts bothering me. So around that time, the first wave of venture capital was happening, and we started out as a consulting organization, but by 2011 we focused on capital raise, and we've not done too bad since then. We've just about crossed $1 billion of institutional capital fundraise that we've advised on 100 plus transactions. These are some of the companies we have raised capital for. Over the years, we've also taken money out of our balance sheet, the profits out of the balance sheet, and started investing in a few of our clients. So the topic for today is fundraising for deep tech startups. I'm going to speak about it from that perspective and not really going to focus too much about what an investment banker does, which we probably can address in the Q&A. So the fundamentals of fundraising are usually the same, be it a deep tech startup. So let me touch upon that and then get into what is specific to a deep tech startup. So get your round size right. Most often, I've seen that companies that are trying to raise capital go to the investor and ask for, I'm looking to raise 20 million or 25 million and so on. The round size is in a way the implied valuation of the company, and if it is not in sync with what stage you're at, investors will probably not respond or give you a polite no. Often founders see a lot of things written in the media around sizes, valuations, and so on, and get swayed into asking a large round, etc., without knowing where they're at. So it's important to know where you're at and ask for the right round. And sometimes there are founders who ask for too small a round when they are actually should be asking for a much larger round. Timing is everything. Try to go to the market when there is some momentum with you. The momentum could be in terms of sales, customers, or some R&D milestone. It is important to appear like somebody who's making progress and moving, and it's a bus that an investor does not want to miss. Last but not the least, when you pitch, stay away from too much of facts and a very dry pitch. Try to tell a story which emotionally connects with the investor. Most buying decisions from investors is emotional, and later, the logic rationalizes why the investment makes sense. So just getting into how a deep tech startup's different, and I've just tried to highlight where some deep tech work is happening. The technical risk in a deep tech startup is much, much higher, difficult to quantify, difficult to digest. And sometimes even the business risk is also very, very high in the sense there's no business model around the tech. So what does this mean for an investor if you wear the investor's hat? They often struggle to understand what's happening. It can be intimidating. Some of the words used in a deep tech founder's pitch might make you feel, hey, I don't understand this. And usually if an investor does not understand something, they do not want to be investing. The gestation cycle of a deep tech startup can be much, much longer than a shallow tech startup. You probably have concept to lab to prototype / product, and then product to business model. So that sometimes does not sync up with the life cycle of a fund. And obviously, given the difficulty in understanding the risk and the gestation periods, the risk is much larger in a deep tech startup. And the founder would definitely be convincing the investor that the returns are also great, but sometimes the returns are very uncertain or difficult to comprehend. So coming to a few pragmatic things that we have seen from our experience that helps with pitching deep tech startups. Evangelize early. I had earlier put in my slide that timing is key. I think in a deep tech startup, it is important to start early, especially with funds who are generalists. So when I say funds who are generalists, it might be funds like Axel, Sequoia, who have large teams and are willing to look at most spaces. But why you need to evangelize early with them is if they emotionally connect with the founding team, then they need to build their thesis. And that usually takes time. So that's why it's important to evangelize early with generalist funds. If there are specialist funds looking at your sector or space, then it is okay. You go to them at the right moment. So how do you evangelize early? I mean, they're not going to really get your technology. So it's important that you build credibility as a founder or as a team. From our observation, we have seen that most good startups and teams and founders have led a life which gives them some sort of an unfair advantage or unique life experience, which puts them in a position nobody else can be in to execute on that particular startup. So getting that message across is important when you're evangelizing early. So after you've evangelized and they want to meet you and get to know more, it's important to lead with what is the impact of what you're doing. Show the impact if possible. If you can do demos, bring them to your factory or whatever. It depends on the startup. try not to start with telling people how the tech works. Most deep tech founders have very high IQs, are very geekish, probably have PhDs, and they're very excited by the tech they're building, that the first thing they love to do is talk about the tech and how it works. It's like in today's context, if you're talking about vaccines, it's better to, as a founder, say we save lives, our efficacy is X%, these are the level of risk from the vaccine, rather than saying we are developed on so-and-so technology, this is what happens to the RNA, DNA and whatever, and then the investor gets intimidated saying, hey, I don't understand this. So you need to talk about the what or the impact, excite them, and then they lean forward and say, you know what, so how does it work? What's your differentiation? That's when you get into the tech. And when you get into the how or the tech, make it very easily consumable. If it's very complicated tech, abstract it, make it something that can be explained to a child so that people get it and understand it. If that is difficult, it's important to find other ways to validate that the tech works. This could be patents, it could be third-party experts on the field validating your tech, which gives social validation to the investor that maybe I don't understand it, but somebody who understands it seems to say it is fine. So that's about it in a nutshell at my end. Happy to take questions. Not able to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Zerin. So, sorry, I was on mute. I was trying to ask you the question about if any startup is looking for the investment and they are preparing for the investment. So, what are those checklists of making yourself ready that you can help us with? So these are some of the things that they should be probably tick marking when they are preparing themselves to approach to investors or to somebody like you.
Sure. So again, there's no perfect science to it, and it depends on the stage of the company. If it's a Series B round, which is where we are typically operating in today, the data, the momentum, the customer pipelines, the maturity of the business, the growth rates, the addressable market, having clarity on all of this and stitching together a story will become important. If we come to an earlier stage company, it's primarily the founding team. So it's important to approach the right people in the funds who are empowered to decide and be able to build your credibility as a team so that it can be a 0-1 risk for a lot of investors. So getting the team out in front of the investor becomes more important. And usually the first impression with the investor is the last impression. So it's important that if you have a prototype or a product demo or like the key questions an investor will ask in an early stage round, you're ready for it. So understanding what is your market size, understanding your value prop versus competition, where your moats lie, what you're trying to build out, all of that, having clarity on it and being able to articulate it in a emotionally appealing manner, being ready for that, that's important.
So help us understand the nature and the ways the professional support are available. Like you provide that professional support to the organization looking for raising the fund. So help us understand how that works basically. So any startup, for example, out of whatever attending here, if they want to go to that process, so how and which stages of the life cycle that basically you support, what kind of support you provide in the different phases of the till they approach you to the till they get that check in their bank account.
Okay. So over the years, having seen a lot of founders, we have felt that raising capital is a different skill set, and actually building a business, hiring people, executing on a business plan can be a different skill set. Some founders have both, and they have an intersection, and usually they do not really need the services of an investment banker, and they're able to move on. But there are some founders where it can be challenging. So what are our services of figuring out the right moment to go to market, figuring the right round size, figuring the right story? The data of the company and the story needs to be in sync with each other. And also knowing the right investor audience and the right people within the investor audience, because the investors are going to be getting a lot of deals to look at. So they are going to focus on the ones where they feel it's going to be good and it is crisp and precise. So once the process starts, you need to be very prompt in following up. The investor says, I'm interested. Can you tell me more about something? So if you take a week or 2 weeks to get back, the interest goes away. So once the process of selling starts, you need to try to close the sale at the earliest and have momentum and preparedness to do it. So typically when we run a process, we ensure the momentum is never lost. And once you have a term sheet from an investor, it is important to have a competitive process by which you are able to, as an investor, optimize on the right partner, the right terms, sometimes the right valuation, depending on what the company needs. Often founders ask, what is the valuation of my company from financial metrics and so on. One thing which determines valuation is just pure demand and supply. How many people want to invest in your company, which is the demand, and supply is your company and what you're asking at what particular stage. So if you run a good process where multiple people are looking to invest, obviously then it just obeys the law of demand and supply, and the valuation, all the terms start getting more and more favorable. So once the term sheet is finalized, you have a due diligence process. Again, you should be prepared and not try to lose time in getting it done. And then you go into final agreements, and then you go into money in the bank. And there are nuances at these stages, slightly technical and boring, so I don't want to get too much into the depth of it.
But see, to be frank with you, some years back, I was not at all even aware about some of the terms that have been used in the context of the investment, right? So the term sheet and a lot of those financial terms which are discussed in the context of investment, basically. And many of those startups may not be even aware about comprehending what exactly we are talking about. So there are a lot of ways the equity can also be basically diluted, or there are different instrument that can be financial instrument that can be looked at when you are looking at a particular way of. So how do you, first of all, I think I'm sure you must also must require to spend time on educating the startup about all of those terms that get into play when we talk about the investment, basically. So help us understanding those terms, and more importantly, your interaction with the startups in making them understand how things works in a financial domain or investment domain.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think during the early days, a lot of terms were Greek and Latin to us too, and we made sure we were always well abreast with what is happening. Sometimes there are some innovations which continuously happen. So if the founder is raising capital for the first time, yes, there is education needed. So we usually break down what a legal clause means, what does 1x liquidation preference mean, or what does a drag back mean, or what is that? But these are typically part of the final agreements, but they do have serious long-term consequences in the journey of the founder. And they usually need to be educated and be aware of what they are getting into. So we usually share a very close emotional connect with the founder because we started out straight from campus at IIM Lucknow. So we know what it feels to be like an entrepreneur. It can be a very lonely journey. And emotionally always standing for the goodwill of the venture and what the founder and telling him in good faith what he or she is getting into when they sign a contract is a process that we do so that they also, and then they usually ask us what is standard, what normally happens. So since we do this on a regular basis and we have the knowledge of having done it many number of times, we're able to share the knowledge and navigate and guide them in the context of what's happening and so on.
So with this professional services that have been offered by organizations like IndigoEdge, basically. So the experience of startup must be really good, right? So means otherwise startup had to do a lot of those things on their own to make it sure that things are moving for them, basically. So tell us more important about how this market of investment banking, especially for the deep tech startup, is evolving in the country. Is it still at an nascent stage or it's maturing to support me? I know the B2C and a lot of consumer-centric innovation, there are definitely a lot of things which are being done in the country, but help us understand about the deep tech startup, how this investment banking ecosystem is now creating that conducive environment for supporting the deep tech innovation in the country.
Okay. So I think this time I've been referred to as InfoEdge so it's a big step up from Aventus to InfoEdge. So I'm again going to clarify it's IndigoEdge. So I'll not lose the opportunity to...
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry we are making these mistakes. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. So, see, investment banking in general sometimes help get deals which might not get done because of the learning curve involved in a fundraise. So a founder probably may not have been great at fundraise, but are great at building companies. They all come into the mix. The whole tech startup ecosystem is in a tremendous bull run. A lot of funds are getting raised. So the number of institutions are willing to invest is increasing by the day. So the number of people you need to reach out, that's very fragmented. And number of startups is also increasing, so that is also very fragmented. So that is where people who run a good process have a much increased probability of raising capital, and that's where an investment bank comes in. Now, specifically addressing the question on deep tech, I see signs of deep tech starting to move in the country over the last 24 to 36 months. There are some specific deep tech focused funds. Speciale Invest is one. Inflexor, Axelor, Bharat Innovation. Downstream, there are people now starting to bet smaller streams of capital, but it's still not got mainstream. And I do think it's just a matter of time. When we started out, the ventures were very simple and easy. Book My Show, Just Dial. It was all simple tech. Then the next wave happened where it, like an Urban Clap, is the next version of Just Dial, and that kind of innovation started happening. Now all these opportunities are going to dry out, and then the real opportunities to make capital grow will lie in deep tech, and most funds will start having deep tech specific teams. And the movement has already started. I see it within a lot of funds. Lightspeed has invested in Pixel, which is a space tech startup taking very high resolution imagery from space. So the movement is starting, and I'm seeing some investment banks who are starting to build verticals around EV or solar, and wherever there is a large enough market, people are starting to build verticals. So as a deep tech startup, if you find specialists, nothing like it. But that movement is happening as we speak and will mature over the next 24 to 36 months.
So there is one question from audience here. For different stages of startup, very different financial instruments are being prepared. Like for example, ISEP note or soft loans or convertible debenture. So can you help us understand, depending on the life cycle, what kind of instruments are preferred or discussed?
Okay. Convertible notes or safe notes have been very popular in the US and Y Combinator and so on. So now that is starting to migrate to India. Earlier, investors were not too comfortable with convertible structure. Just for clarity, a convertible structure is the valuation is pegged to a discount to the next institutional round. So you don't agree on valuation today because nobody understands where the company is at, what is the return, what is the risk, but I want to invest. So let me peg it to the next institutional round as some sort of validation coming at that point of time. Typically, discounts can be 20% to the pre-money of the next round or something like 1% per month from the time the money was put into the next institutional round. So these rounds are good for the founders and teams in the sense if you dilute too much in the beginning because you don't know the valuation and you enter into a priced round, you might dilute. So if for early stage companies, if founders get a chance to do convertibles, they should. It's a good way to reduce. I mean, most often the dilution is lesser in a convertible round.
I'm just picking one more question because we have some time. How does one pitch to an investor where the company has a POC done and looking for funding to take this further? Means a company may not have the live customer, but only POCs has been in progress. So is there this probably is early stage funding. So are there some guidance or some institutions which can help companies in raising fund in early stage as well?
Okay. Yeah. So as I said in deep tech startup, usually it's concept to prototype or proof of concept to commercial version to business. So there are some funds who are very clear they're okay to fund POC to product. Like the names I mentioned, Special Invest, Axelor. There are funds who, if you look at their portfolio, they've picked companies and teams at a much earlier stage and done it. So find the people who do it. Secondly, demonstrate the POC well. If possible, show pilots and market validation of, like if you run the POC or the pilots with the industry and they're able to validate it, it also helps. So in such situations, it's important to get investors to have their attention and be able to see what the POC is and understand what's the risk between POC and commercialization.
Yeah, thank you. And I think as we are nearing to the timeline set up for the session, I would certainly like to conclude this session. And thanks, Mr. Zerin and IndigoEdge, to be with us for interacting on this important matter. So we can conclude this with your last word of the advice to the startups, cybersecurity startups here. So with that, we can conclude the session, sir.
Yeah, once again, thank you to the audience and Mr. Vinayak. It's been an enjoyable session. I think there's been never a better time for cybersecurity. I was just reading that about roughly 10 billion of global capital has got invested into cybersecurity startups in the first 6 months of the year, which kind of totals what was raised last year. The whole remote working environment and the various vulnerabilities which are being exposed to small openings in enterprises / remote workers and so on means there's never been a better why now. This is the right moment to invest in cybersecurity startups, and there's a lot of global investor interest, and you'll see that spilling over to the country too. And we have seen a few promising ones in India. I think we have at one point looked at cloud SIC. So I think this is one of the best moments for cybersecurity companies that can go global. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. And we look forward to work with you, Mr. Zerin, going forward, because this is the area that we had been, as a national COE with Government of India, have been working. So thanks for joining us today. Thank you very much. Anand, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Zerin, for sharing your insights with the audience. Thank you, Vinayak sir. So with this, we close the session. I'll request the audience to stay tuned in for the session on accelerating cloud security innovation, the AWS experience. Thank you. Bye. Take care.